Good morning and welcome to the South Carolina Public Service Commission. We are continuing the hearing today of the request of Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated's request for approval to continue its portfolio of demand-side management programs to include approval of a new residential demand response program and reaffirmation of the demand-side management rate rider. Whew. First, we'll have a roll call of commissioners. All commissioners are present here in the hearing room, and it appears that all necessary parties for the hearing are also present. We are at the point now where it is presentation by SACE, and who's doing it, Mr. Gooding? All right, well, come forward. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Powers. CCL and SACE called Jim Gravatt to the stand.
Come forward and be sworn. And I apologize, we made you sit all day yesterday, didn't we?
If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Mr. Gravatt, would you please state your name, title, and employer for the commission?
Yes, my name is Jim Gravatt, and I'm a managing consultant with Energy Futures Group.
Mr. Gravatt, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on September 19th, 2024, direct testimony comprising 26 pages?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
No.
If the questions put to you in your direct testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Gravatt, did you also attach to your direct testimony one exhibit, your resume, identified as Exhibit JG1, comprising 7 pages?
Yes.
And was Exhibit JG1 prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would now move to have Mr. Gravatt's pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Gravatt will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
I would also move to have Mr. Gravatt's Exhibit JG1 entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Gravatt identified as JG1 is marked for identification and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 4.
Thank you. Mr. Gravatt, did you also cause to be pre-filed in this docket on October 21st, 2024, surrebuttal testimony comprising 7 pages?
Yes.
At this time, do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
No.
If the questions put to you in your surrebuttal testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would now move to have Mr. Gravatt's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed surrebuttal testimony of Mr. Gravatt will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Gravatt, do you have a prepared summary of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Would you please read your summary for the commission?
I'd be very happy to. Thank you. And good morning, Chair Powers and Commissioners. It's great to be back in South Carolina with you all. I always enjoy these proceedings. I really do. My name is Jim Gravatt, and as stated earlier, I'm a managing consultant at Energy Futures Group. I have more than 30 years of experience designing, managing, and advising clients on energy efficiency and demand-side management programs, including in various leadership roles at Efficiency Vermont, Vermont Gas, and the District of Columbia Sustainable Energy Utility. And I feel it's important to say in this context, when we're looking at program design, that 20 years of those 30 were spent implementing and managing programs, feet on the street, talking to customers, figuring out how to make those programs more successful. In my current role, I've advised regulators, utilities, and consumer advocates on matters related to energy efficiency in more than 20 states and Canadian provinces. In this case, my testimony addresses the shortcomings of Dominion Energy South Carolina's proposed 5-year EEDSM portfolio and offers recommendations for how the company could achieve more meaningful energy savings. As stated in my testimony, I appreciate that the company put forward some small but important portfolio enhancements, including a proposal to provide more outreach and weatherization services to single-family and mobile homes in the Neighborhood Energy Efficiency Program, and a proposal to implement a residential demand response program. But overall, the company's plan falls far short of what is achievable. When it comes to energy efficiency and demand-side management, DESC is among the poorest performing large investor-owned utilities in the United States. And yet here the company proposes a largely business-as-usual portfolio for the next 5 years, ignoring the availability of much higher levels of cost-effective savings from EE and DSM programs. To add insult to injury, DESC has requested the authority to terminate any DSM program without first obtaining Commission approval, a request that, in my view, is wholly inconsistent with the Commission's authority and responsibility to ensure that the company implements programs that benefit its customers. In a regulated environment, it is unreasonable for the company to have full authority to terminate its programs on a whim without justifying such decisions to the Commission and to its ratepayers. I agree with ORS that the Commission should reject the company's request and instead reaffirm that DESC may not terminate an EE or DSM program without first obtaining Commission approval. Indeed, the company should be less concerned with terminating programs and more concerned with improving its current ones and maximizing savings through additional EE/DSM offerings. The company's 5-year plan proposes overall savings levels below the minimal savings projected in the 2023 potential study, even though the company provides no empirical data to support these lower savings levels. In my testimony, I specifically address DESC's unreasonably low projections for 2 of the company's programs, namely the Home Energy Checkup and Neighborhood Energy Efficiency programs. First, DESC proposes lower savings in its Home Energy Checkup, or HEC program, than the amount of savings identified in the 2023 potential study, even though HEC is robustly cost-effective. And I'll note that in the recalculation of cost effectiveness that staff requested, staff I believe may have been ORS, apologies for not being clear there, but the utility cost test result for HEC was around 2.0. That is robustly cost-effective. That's not on the margin. Worse still, most of those lower savings are not comprehensive savings, but result primarily from HEC Tier 1, which provides participants with an in-person or virtual walkthrough audit along with a number of measures that can be installed during the audit, such as low-flow shower heads. More significant savings, however, are achievable through HEC Tier 2, whose measures include air sealing, duct sealing, and insulation for eligible customers. Unfortunately, at its current participation rate of less than 200 households per year, it would take more than 300 years for the company to reach even 10% of its residential customers through HEC Tier 2, 300 years. The company should be required to reach far more customers and provide far greater savings in the aggregate from this program than it currently projects. I recommend that the Commission direct the company to complete an average of 500 HEC Tier 2 jobs in each year of the plan period. Second, the Neighborhood Energy Efficiency Program, or NEEP, is the company's primary EE program for income-qualified customers. According to the company, NEEP provides home walkthroughs, no-cost energy-saving measures, and recommendations for additional ways to save energy for desk customers in income-qualified single and multifamily residential neighborhoods. And as was discussed yesterday, according to a 2022 opinion dynamics study for the company, approximately 20% of DESC's residential customers, which is roughly 135,000 households, are low-income customers. But DESC proposes to reach fewer than 6,000 households annually through NEEP, and only a small fraction of those will receive the comprehensive weatherization measures that can significantly reduce their energy bills. Although DESC proposes somewhat higher savings for NEEP than projected in the potential study, those saving levels still fall far short of the need for increased savings among the company's income-qualified customers. DESC's forecast not only underestimates NEEP savings levels, but reverses the trend of increasing NEAP savings actually achieved since PY10. The company's proposed plan includes a 5-year NEAP program budget of $14.5 million. Pursuant to a settlement agreement reached in the company's recent rate case, the ESC is committed to use a total of $3 million in shareholder funds to increase the budget to $17.5 million. And I appreciate that commitment of the $3 million in shareholder funds. Nevertheless, in my direct testimony, I recommend that the Commission direct the company to increase the budget further to no less than $20 million over 5 years, which is an additional $500,000 per year above what is currently proposed. I further recommend that the Commission direct the ESC to commit to increasing mobile home and single-family home participation in NEAP to serve a combined 500 households per year with comprehensive weatherization measures. In rebuttal, the ESC frames my modest recommendations as pie-in-the-sky proposals that depend on artificially inflated participation rates. But as I explained in my surrebuttal testimony, not only are my proposals achievable, they also are not merely theoretical. They're grounded in hands-on experience that I gained managing award-winning energy efficiency programs in Vermont and the District of Columbia, including home retrofit programs like HEC and low-income programs like NEAP. There are steps the company can take to make it easier for customers to participate in HEC and NEAP, and thus increase the number of homes served and the amount of savings achieved by those programs. It is disappointing that instead the company has chosen to disregard even modest opportunities to achieve energy and cost savings for its customers, especially those in greatest need. But this is nothing new. Time and time again, DESC has claimed that it cannot do any better. Rather than try to achieve higher energy savings for its customers, DESC has chosen to bury its head in the sand. It has chosen to dismiss stakeholder concerns raised in the Energy Efficiency Advisory Group, disregard potential improvements to existing programs, ignore best practices, and reject recommendations from interested parties in this proceeding and past cases before this commission. But the company can do better. It can do much better. I urge the Commission to adopt my recommendations and direct the company to pursue higher, more comprehensive energy savings for its customers, particularly low-income customers with high energy usage. This concludes the summary of my testimony. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Gravatt. The witness is now available for cross-examination and for questions from the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Gooding and Mr. Gravatt. Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated, do you have any questions?
No, sir, we have no questions of this witness.
All right, sir. Department of Consumer Affairs, Mr. Edwards. And Mr. Edwards, you do win the tie award today.
Good morning, Mr. Gravatt. How are you this morning?
Good morning, sir. I'm doing quite well, thank you.
My name is Jake Edwards. I'm with the Department of Consumer Affairs. It's nice to meet you.
Same.
And I'm just going to let you know you can take a sigh of relief. I don't have numbers. I don't have spreadsheets. You're in the clear.
I appreciate that, although I think I would want to say that there's a lot of very well-crafted text in the company's filing and testimony, but it's the numbers that we should be looking at.
Agreed. So you've been working in energy efficiency for over 30 years. Is that correct?
It is.
And I see that you've testified in many jurisdictions, so you must be generally aware of how other jurisdictions treat EEDSM. Is that correct?
I'm certainly aware of how it's treated in the jurisdictions in which I've worked, and there are a lot of commonalities and also some differences.
Okay. Are you aware that not all states allow opt-out measures?
Absolutely.
And are you aware that in the Southeast there are some states that allow opt-outs and others that do not?
I have to say that I'm primarily aware of the states that do allow opt-outs. Those are states that I've more frequently worked in.
Okay. Are you aware that in states with opt-outs, opt-outs are generally determined by a statute or regulation?
Yes.
And are you aware that it's a settlement that creates opt-outs in South Carolina?
Yes.
Moving to a different subject, did you review the Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress EEDSM programs and riders as well, and any of the other matters you've testified in?
I can say that I've participated in the Duke Carolinas Stakeholder Collaborative Group for at least 5 years. I have reviewed some of their filings, and I have testified in some of the cases in South Carolina.
Okay. And are there differences between the other utilities, such as the incentive structures?
There certainly are differences. I often do not look in a very detailed way in the incentive structures, but certainly when there are conversations about improving program performance, we do look at that, and I will look at that. There are many things that contribute to the success of a program. Incentive amounts is certainly one of them. Marketing, customer awareness, understanding what customers need, simplifying process all contribute.
Okay. And so are there similarities within those other EE programs as well?
Similarities with DESC?
Yes.
I would say there are similarities. In a sense, there aren't really that many types of programs that different utilities have found to be successful. It's always about identifying measures, providing an incentive, making a process that works effectively for the customer, understanding what customers care about, doing contractor training. It's all those things. They're all quite similar, but the level of effort that different utilities put into those different things varies. And that, I think, really is indicative of the level of success that occurs.
All right. And does opt-out apply to both Duke Entity's commercial and industrial customers as well?
In the Carolinas, there are a lot of customers who are opted out.
And you've looked at the EEDSM statute for South Carolina, correct?
I have looked at it.
Would you agree that because the statute is silent on a number of issues, that there's a fair amount of policy decisions that the Commission must make for EEDSM programs?
Noting that I cannot offer a legal opinion there, I will agree that that would be a common sense understanding, and I agree.
And, for example, am I correct that the statute doesn't mention anything about opt-outs?
Subject to check.
And doesn't mention anything about the specific incentives offered?
Again, subject to check. I would be shocked if it did.
And then would you agree that if the Commission wanted to make a statewide policy decision that impacts EEDSM programs, then they could open a general docket instead of go through a company-by-company docket?
Absolutely.
All right. Now moving into just some other issues and topics. Would I be correct, and I believe Commissioner Caston asked Ms. Shelton about this yesterday, that energy efficiency technologies have changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years?
They have, but there are also a lot of the same technologies when I was doing energy audits for the weatherization program in 1991 that haven't changed that much. It's both rapidly advancing technology and some of the same old stuff.
Has the market and cost of these technologies changed significantly in that time frame?
Certainly in nominal dollars. It's hard. I couldn't answer whether in real terms, whether what it cost to insulate a house in 1992 is different than it is now, but certainly in nominal dollars. And the markets have changed. There's much greater awareness generally.
Okay, thank you. Now, would I be correct when I'm talking about the benefits of these technologies, that the benefits to the system of EEDSM is potentially delaying the need for future capital investments in generation, transmission, and distribution?
That is absolutely correct. It's the underlying premise that caused demand-side management and energy efficiency programs to be required of utilities in the first place. It's all about least cost service delivery, which is the utility's obligation. If it costs less to run EEDSM programs than to build transmission, distribution, generation, then they should do the EEDSM programs.
Okay, and would I be correct that there are other benefits, such as reduced exposure to other forms of risk like fuel volatility, price suppression effects, and reductions in environmental compliance costs as well?
Absolutely.
Are there any benefits I'm missing to the system from EEDSM programs?
Well, whether it's a system benefit, I'm not sure you would call it that, but it would be reflected in utility savings, which is the extent to which programs are geared towards lower income customers, and reducing customers' bills reduces their arrearages, increases their ability to pay their bills, then that reduces the cost the utility has to incur to go and get that money, or that other customers will pay to make up for what those customers weren't able to pay.
All right, thank you. And these benefits, they're going to arise from just any DSM program, regardless of whether it's industrial, commercial, or residential?
Yes,
And would I be correct if I classify these as system-wide benefits?
absolutely.
Okay. Would it be correct then if I said that even a commercial or industrial customer who opts out of DSM programs will benefit from this delayed need for future generation that results from these EE and DSM programs?
Absolutely, and I will say that it is a concern with opt-out customers that they avoid paying in on the assumption that they're going to do energy efficiency on their own. We don't know if they actually are or not. That's an assumption, but they definitely are going to receive benefits that other customers are paying for.
Okay, thank you. Would I be correct then if I said that a non-participating residential customer could partake in EEDSM measures or actions without even being involved in a utility program?
Yes,
So, for example, I could, walk over, turn up my thermostat 1 degree in the summertime, and that would be an energy efficiency or demand side management action, correct?
I would call it an energy efficiency action. I
Okay.
think the term demand-side management really does refer to a set of intentional activities by a utility to control the amount of demand on the system.
Okay, but you agree that this customer is taking an energy efficient action
Yes.
without, okay.
For sure.
And this non-participating customer, despite taking this energy efficient action, they can't opt out, is that correct?
The residential customer can't opt out, correct?
And is it correct then that it's only commercial and industrial customers that can opt out?
Yes.
And I want to jump into some of my co-counsel's line of questioning yesterday. Did you hear his line of questioning with Ms. Shelton regarding the opt-out form?
I did.
And are you aware of that lack of verification for opt-out customers? Sounds like.
Yes.
And are you aware that there's no energy efficiency goal required for opt-out customers?
Yes.
Does this lack of verification concern you regarding opt-out customers?
It does. I mean, my general preference has always been to have the commercial industrial customers participating in the programs along with all the other customers. There are opt-outs, which are basically, I've done it, you don't have to worry about it, trust me. There are also what I believe are called self-direct programs, which do require, they assume that the customer is going to do some energy efficiency, but they do require, and it varies depending on the jurisdiction, I can't give you any specific examples today, but they do require different levels of information about what was done. So in some cases it may be you actually have to provide a detailed description of the measures, the costs, the savings, and so forth. In other jurisdictions, they may have to be evaluated and verified.
Okay. Would you agree that without opt-outs and if program costs were spread to all customers, then residential bills will decrease?
If the program costs did not increase. However, if opted-out customers, if opt-outs were ended and those customers were then included in the pool of eligible customers, in my view, it would be reasonable to think that they would want to participate in the program since they're paying in. And it's likely that budgets would have to increase to allow those customers to participate. So whether, in that scenario, residential bills would actually decrease the amount that they're paying in towards the energy efficiency programs, I don't know.
Would you agree that it's something that should be studied more?
Yes.
And would you agree that without opt-outs, there would be more energy savings opportunities for the system?
Yes.
And would you agree that, I think you just answered this, but would you agree that there would be more money potentially for EEDSM programs?
Certainly.
And are there any other benefits from not allowing opt-outs that you're aware of?
I think the greatest benefits would be potentially to the system by increasing the pool of potentially cost-effective measures that could be implemented. You implement more cost-effective energy efficiency, you reduce system costs, and everyone benefits in that scenario.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gravatt. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Walmart, Ms. Eaton, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. ORS.
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Gravatt, welcome back to South Carolina.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner questions? Commissioner Belson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Gravatt. How
Good
are
morning.
you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
And I too welcome you to South Carolina. Thanks for coming back to see us.
Thank you.
You've made some recommendations, and one of those is, I believe that DEC try to achieve 500 of the HEC Tier 2, I think, jobs annually.
That's correct.
If it's left to the customer, based on information from the utility, how is the company supposed to target 500 jobs? I mean, they can't make the customers go in for some of these actions. So how could that be accomplished?
Thank you for the question. I think it's a great question, and I think it speaks to a number of fundamental reasons why utilities run demand-side management programs in the first place. If we were only relying on the customer, then the customer would do whatever they're going to do in the same way that the gentleman I was just speaking to asked about a customer who turns the temperature up in cooling season on their own without a program. If we're only saying whatever the customers do, that's all that is possible, then that's what's going to happen. Sometimes they call it naturally occurring energy efficiency. But the reason that we have energy efficiency and demand-side management programs is to provide a reason for customers to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And this is where different utilities are much more successful, much more or less successful than others. And it has to do with if a utility says, well, we've got a program, whatever, you can participate or not, it's totally up to you. A lot of customers are going to probably disregard it. If the utility markets the program in a way that speaks to the customer, and in many cases this is going to lower your bills, or it may be with home retrofit programs, there's been a lot of work on these. Maybe you're going to be more comfortable in summer, you're going to be cooler, and you're going to be warmer in winter. The market research determines what customers in a specific area are most concerned about and target that marketing. If the utility says we've got a program and we're marketing it, we've hit your hot buttons, we know what you want. But in order to participate, first you got to fill out this form, and then you got to call a contractor and see if you can schedule it. And then if the contractor has some recommendations, then you have to find another contractor and get bids for the work and so forth. It's very burdensome, and they may not do it. So it's designing the participation process in a way that's appealing to the customer and to get them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. I always think of Coca-Cola. And I imagine a board meeting with Coke. And the chairman of the board says, we need more sales. And the director of sales comes in and says, hey, it's up to the customers. I can't make them do anything. That person would be out of a job on that day, because it's all about what you do. I was on a collaborative meeting with Duke, and they were explaining a pilot program that they're operating. And the manager of that program explained what their theory was of why customers were going to participate, what the results were that they expected, and what they were going to do if they didn't get those results, to change their approach to manage the program to get the results. And, And I said to the Duke team, that's what I want to hear. You're more focused on getting the results and managing to get those results rather than just letting the customers do whatever.
I see where I see the SACE or CCL participates in the advisory group. Do you participate in the Dominion advisory group?
Yes, I do.
You've also made the recommendation for Dominion to increase its budget. What, $500,000 annually? Well, $20 million. I couldn't make $5 million anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know what the rate impact would be to customers with regard to that
I do
recommendation?
not. I did not study that.
Okay.
No.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer. Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good to see you again, Mr. Cravat.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
I want to start with more of a big picture question. And we talked earlier about the goal of EE and DSM of avoiding generation and transmission costs. Are there cases where there's been clear wins in that arena? Meaning, this is a really complex world that we all work in, and there's things happening from different that tweak here and make dramatic changes. But I'm just curious if there's with your 30 years of experience, are there circumstances that you can describe where there have been direct takeaways that show direct benefit, or is it always a piece of the pie?
I think there are cases where there have been direct benefits. I'm not sure that many of them are well documented. There may be some. I can tell you two that I'm aware of. One is with my own experience at Vermont Gas, where Vermont Gas is a funny little gas utility of, now it's probably 45,000 customers. It was 35,000 when I was there. And it's fed with one transmission line coming down from Canada. And so as the Burlington area was growing in population, there's a 10-inch pipe coming down from Canada. They could only put so much gas through that pipe. So the company decided it needed to do what they called a looping project, which was to build a parallel 5 or 10 mile pipeline, 16-inch pipeline, parallel to the 10-inch line, because it would hold a lot more gas and it could move more gas in those peak periods. And honestly, the engineering manager and I would go get coffee pretty often, and we had conversations about when the next looping project needed to occur, because they were doing it in stages. We'll do 3 miles this year, we'll do 2 miles the next year, and so forth. And based on the savings that the demand-side management programs at Vermont Gas were achieving, particularly in peak hour, because that was the whole thing, they deferred year by year that transmission looping project, which saved customers a bunch of money. Another example is anecdotal, but it is written up in a report that I participated in co-authoring with my colleague Chris Nemi, Con Edison in the New York City area. And Con Edison did a number of projects specifically targeted, and this was electric, specifically targeted at constrained regions, constrained districts, where they actually did performance contracting with, they put out an RFP saying we need to save certain amount of energy and demand in this area and give us a bid to do it. And there were penalties for the contractors if they didn't achieve the results. Now, they didn't achieve the results in all of the neighborhoods and all of the areas, but they did in some. And what the manager of that program said to us when we were speaking to him about this research report, he said, what it did was it gave us enough time to realize we never needed to do those expansions in the first place. That what our projections for growth were not correct. And as technology was changing and people were getting more efficiency, we didn't need to build them. But if we hadn't done those programs, we would have gone in and done all this expansion and customers would have paid for it over the next 30 years.
Thank you.
My
Interesting.
pleasure.
How often are EE or DSM programs terminated in your experience?
I would say, in my experience, programs are more often changed than terminated. There's some situations, I can think of programs that are terminated when there's a regulatory change or a statute change. In Ohio, for example, there had been statutory requirements for energy efficiency programs in the utility that got repealed, and utilities, canceled a bunch of programs. I think there's been so much discussion about, well, we can't get savings from lighting anymore. Absolutely true. Mostly true. But mostly lighting has been incorporated. I mean, mostly it's not just a lighting program, retail lighting program. Mostly there are other appliances and things that are incorporated into that program. And so where the lighting measures may be pulled back because standards have made those measures, made it not cost effective for the utility to continue to support those measures because they're efficient anyway. But they still have other measures in the program. They don't tend to cancel the whole program. The one example I can think of that Ms. Shelton mentioned is appliance recycling. There, over the last decade, there have only been 2 or 3, to my knowledge, vendors who implement those programs. One of them went under a few years ago. The other one has had challenges. And so some utilities have said, we can't find anybody to do this program.
Okay. I think I heard you say that it was mostly true about the, to use a Commissioner Caston term, the ubiquitousness of, lighting and the standards. Why did you say mostly true?
Well, I think as Ms. Shelton mentioned, if they're going to, so at retail, there's virtually no products, to my knowledge, that are not covered by the standard. So there's no coupon or instant rebate at retail for efficient lighting. But if a company or program is doing an audit at someone's home and they have a lot of incandescent lighting, it may still be worthwhile to change that out.
So an opportunistic, you're there, and which is exactly what Ms. Shelton described. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about plans and goals and what happens when they're not met. What's the impact if we were to order some of your recommendations and I guess in particular, increasing the home energy checkup tier 2 to require more to be accomplished each year? What's the impact if it's not met?
I think to some degree that's could be up to the commission, but in terms of rate costs, rate impact, if the company doesn't meet its goals, my understanding is that the company recovers the costs it actually incurs. The company does not recover budget amounts that they don't invest. So there wouldn't be any rate impact. If the company, and I'm not familiar, and I apologize for this, I'm not familiar with a specific mechanism used in the company's cases in South Carolina for recovering costs. In some cases, they'll project costs and collect that amount based on the projected, and there'll be a true-up after. If that's the case here, and there's a true-up after, in some jurisdictions, the carrying costs, if the customers have been paying up front, those costs are also addressed in the true-up. So I'm not sure here. But so effectively, there shouldn't be any rate impact from money that's not spent. Potentially, there's rate impact by not achieving the savings because there's less capital investment that would be deferred. So there's some negative consequence there, potentially. I think, again, I can't offer a legal opinion here. I assume the commission may have some discretion about how it wants to approach Dominion if they fail to reach their targets. I don't know if there's any structure for penalties. In some jurisdictions there is. Some cases that's statutory. So I can't speak to what your discretion is there. I have certainly, I think of Maryland in in the last decade, the earlier part of the last decade, where there were no penalties or financial incentives for the company to meet their goals. But the commission made it very, very clear to the utilities that they were expected to meet their goals, and they did. You know, I'll tell you, when I worked, this is anecdotal, when I worked at Vermont Gas managing energy efficiency programs, and my boss was the vice president in charge of rates and regulatory, and she said to me one day, she said, you know, I love demand-side management programs because when we do a good job, the regulators are much more open when we come in for a rate case. And when we don't do a good job with energy efficiency, they scrutinize everything we do. So, there may be some discretion there.
Okay, thank you. Earlier, you made a comment about low income. I'm thinking about cost shift and burden, and you made a comment about the potential benefit of low income programs from the standpoint of cost associated with dealing with customers whose accounts are in arrears. Is that a fair
Yes.
general? Okay.
Mhm.
Are you aware of that being tracked? Are you aware of what those numbers could be?
I can tell you that in some jurisdictions, there's been an effort to estimate what those costs might be and to assign them, on so much per kilowatt hour saved, to include them in the cost effectiveness test. In some cases, that would be in the utility cost test. Some cases, TRC. Sometimes more of a societal view. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I can't think of any utility that I'm aware of that has actually looked at, say, a period or a group of customers who were not receiving the benefits and a group who did receive the program benefits to track how arrearages changed, which would be an interesting study.
Do you have specific examples that come to mind in terms of the UCT or the TRC or societal, in terms of companies that have evaluated that?
That have, I can think of some examples of where those benefits are included in the avoided costs for cost effectiveness testing, and Maryland comes to mind right off the top. Maryland, last year or so, completely revised their cost effectiveness test, and now use the Maryland jurisdictional specific cost effectiveness test that includes carbon emission reduction values and criteria pollutant savings values and arrearage reduction.
I want to talk a little bit about opt-outs. Is there any value in collecting the data of the companies who opt out in terms of their actual energy efficiency work? It's my understanding, some people feel like that information is, some people have talked about confidentiality, but it seems like we work in a world where confidentiality is dealt with all the time. Some people have talked about the cost, and so I'm trying to, the cost of participating if you are staying in. So I'm asking about a slice where you're opting out, but what's the value of identifying what the overall savings were? Not so much, well, dollars, but certainly megawatts.
From my perspective, the value would be initially it would be useful in helping the commission determine whether opt-outs actually make sense for the system. If the premise that these customers are doing energy efficiency anyway, it's not a big deal, we don't need to keep track. How true is that? I have no idea, personally. I mean, certainly I've spoken with, let's say I've been in meetings or conferences with some representatives from industrial customers, and I have the sense that they do have an effective energy management team, and they are looking at it very closely. It's possible in some of those cases that the payback criteria, for example, that they use are different than the payback criteria that system benefits might be looked at. So if a company says we're going to do anything that's got a 2-year payback, and there are energy efficiency measures that they could do with support from programs that would be cost effective, but over a longer time frame, company's not going to do them, but they might do them if they were participating in a program. So there's that, but just understanding whether they're actually saving what they suggest they are, and whether that provides enough benefit that they shouldn't have to pay in.
Are there values associated with just better data? And I'll admit that from the work that I used to do, I would cringe over, where South Carolina rates, and from an energy efficiency perspective. And I now understand that there is this whole other world that we don't know about. Is there any value other than avoiding the cringe factor in having that number?
Well, there could be, and this is a little theoretical because I can't speak to how Dominion forecasts load and growth for its larger customers. But if, for example, customers were implementing a lot of energy efficiency or planned to, and Dominion was not aware of that, it could affect their load forecasts, which could affect capital investments that customers are paying for. Maybe that's not an issue, I don't know, but theoretically it could be.
Okay. I have one other note, and I'm trying to interpret it. So I think I will say thank you very much, and I may come back with another question if any of my peers have questions, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Any further commissioner questions? Commissioner Caston.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning, sir.
In your direct testimony, I think rebuttal, you state or discuss that the company should not be able to terminate programs without a hearing, if I understood that correct.
May I caveat that slightly?
Absolutely.
I may or may not have said this, I can't remember, but my thinking is I don't know that a hearing should be required to terminate a program. There may be some hypothetical situation that a hearing's not required, but the commission, I believe the commission should be able to make that choice or make that decision. If the company says, we want to terminate this program, the commission could say, the evidence is so powerful here, we don't need to have a hearing, we're just going to agree with it. Or could say, we're not sure what's going on here, let's have a hearing. But I think the commission should have the discretion to make that call rather than the company.
I understand, and I guess that's what I was really trying to understand too. ORS, has a position relative to, having hearings. And, what you have in your rebuttal and direct's probably very clear and straightforward, but I wanted to make sure I understood it. And relative to like the modify, amend, or expand, or terminate, are you saying that you believe the commission should have the flexibility to have hearing, not hearing, stay on top of it, or is that not what you're saying?
Generally, I would say that I think the commission should have that right to make those determinations. I don't think there needs to be a hearing for everything, and certainly, the many examples that Ms. Shelton put in her rebuttal testimony of things changes the company's made to programs that it was able to do in a timely manner without having to go have a hearing. I support that. If you want to increase budget because there's customer demand, if you want to change incentive levels because program's not, it's not performing the way you want it to and you want to get more customers to participate. Generally, I think that's fine. They should do that. It's just because unless there's some condition on it, saying the company can terminate whatever they want to do, it's fine. There's nothing that says the company couldn't just decide to stop all their programs. And I'm not saying they would do that, but I think it's a kind of a bad setup to waive that, give that authority away to the company.
I understand. Thank you very much. And I welcome you also to South Carolina. I think it's supposed to be pretty this week. Maybe you can stay longer.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Chair Powell.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. I didn't remember, but Commissioner Caston's questions kind of led me to another one. Do you think there's a way that we can define, or do you know of examples in other jurisdictions where there's a definition for what is acceptable to be modified or expanded or amended without commission engagement?
I can think of a few examples, and I'm not sure of the specifics, but in Maryland it's come up, and I want to say, and I've seen this in other cases, I'd have to think a little bit about where, but it's often tied to a budget change, that a company can change a budget by up to 20% of what's been approved, higher or lower, and it doesn't require approval. In some cases I can think of where that flexibility is coupled with a need to provide notice to staff and parties. 30 days. In 30 days, we're going to change the incentives in this program, or we're going to increase the budget to give them time to disagree if they're going to. I think that rarely happens. Generally a utility would talk to parties before they did something like that so that it would occur smoothly. But there's just some guardrails in some jurisdictions so that the company doesn't do crazy stuff.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Any further commissioner questions? Any redirect, Mr. Gooding? Thank you very much. Thank you. You are excused.
Thank you. My great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ORS calls Mr. Jeffrey Gordon to the stand.
Come forward, Mr. Gordon, and be sworn. Before that, I just want to, for the record, that Walmart and Consumer Affairs did not have witnesses to present.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Gordon.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Jeffrey A. Gordon.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed as a regulatory analyst by ORS.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 6 pages of direct testimony pre-filed in this proceeding on September 19th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions this morning that were posed within the pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chair, ORS would move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Jeffrey Gordon be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Jeffrey Gordon will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Gordon, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 5 pages of surrebuttal testimony pre-filed in this proceeding on October 21st, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
Yes. On page 4, line 10, after T&D cost, insert within 30 days of the Commission's order in this docket. And on page 4, line 16, replace the year 2025 with 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. And Mr. Chair, those that corrected page has been pre-filed with the Commission, I believe, yesterday. Mr. Gordon, with those changes, if I asked you the same questions this morning that were posed within the pre-filed surrebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chair, ORS would move that the pre-filed surrebuttal testimony of Jeffrey Gordon be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-file corrected surrebuttal testimony of Jeffrey Gordon will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gordon, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please give that now?
Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to set forth and support ORS's recommendations resulting from the examination and review of Dominion Energy South Carolina's request for approval to continue its demand-side management plan to include approval of a new residential demand response program and reaffirmation of its demand-side management rate rider. ORS retained Eric Cutter as a witness for this proceeding to discuss ORS's recommendations resulting from the examination of DESC's suite of DSM programs. By reviewing the company's application and direct testimony to determine compliance with South Carolina laws and prior commission orders, my direct testimony represents the public interest. Subsequent to the filing of my direct testimony, I filed rebuttal testimony in this docket. The purpose of my surrebuttal testimony is to respond to certain portions of the rebuttal testimony of company witness Cheryl Shelton filed with the Commission on October 8, 2024. Generally, my surrebuttal recommends approval of the programs with certain conditions. This concludes the summary of my direct and surrebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Chair, Mr. Gordon's available for questions.
Dominion, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning, Mr. Gordon. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing well.
Great. Have you heard the testimony in this docket so far that there's a lot of policy decisions the commission has to make regarding EEDSM programs?
Yes, I have.
And would you also agree that if the commission wanted to make these policy decisions that would impact all programs, they could open a generic docket instead of doing a utility by utility review?
I believe the Commission has that authority, yes.
In your testimony, you also mentioned that you have knowledge and experience with general rate cases and DSM programs and their associated cost recovery mechanisms. Is that right?
Yes.
The company's EEDSM programs are recovered through a rider that gets trued up every year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are those costs subject to a prudency and reasonableness review?
Yes, the ORS reviews the annual update every year.
And are you aware of any times the ORS has said that a certain cost wasn't prudent or reasonable?
I haven't personally reviewed the annual updates for EEDSM, so I can't really speak to that. I'm not aware one way or the other.
Okay, that's fair enough. So you are familiar with cost recovery in general rate cases?
Yes.
Okay, and for let's say a generating plant, the cost recovery there is going to be amortized over a much longer period than 3 years. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yes, it would be amortized, I believe, over the lifetime of the institution.
Okay, so maybe upwards of 50 years potentially?
20, 30 years.
20 to 30 years. Okay, thank you. And it's true that a new generating plant is going to cost a lot more than a new energy efficiency program. Would you agree?
Yes.
So a lot more initial upfront capital likely for a generating plant?
Yes.
And a new generating plant is also going to be subject to a prudency review, though, correct?
It would be, yes.
So if a company constructed a new generating plant, it's got to typically comes in for cost recovery after that, right? After it's used and useful?
Yes, used and useful is the primary metric by which we judge prudency.
And if the commission found that those costs weren't prudent, the company likely wouldn't be able to recover all those costs. Is that right?
I couldn't hear you at the end there. Could you repeat
Yeah,
that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. So if after constructing the plant, the company comes in for cost recovery, but the commission found that it wasn't prudent investment or certain aspects weren't reasonable, a company would likely not be able to recover all those costs. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you think that in that case the company would have an impact on their credit rating?
I can't really speak to what impact it would have on the credit rating, but that sounds reasonable.
Did you hear me ask Ms. Shelton about if a hurricane came and destroyed a generating plant that existed?
Yes.
Do you know in that case would it be likely that the cost would be shared between the company and its customers?
I can't really say. I'm not sure of the answer on that. That would be something that the company's financial management would have to answer, I believe.
Okay. Did you hear me ask Ms. Shelton about the settlements that created opt-outs being from 2010 and 2013?
Yes.
Okay. And ORS represents the public interest, is that right?
We do.
Are you aware that the statutory definition of public interest has changed since 2013?
Do you have a specific example?
I don't have it in front of me, but at one point in time there was a specific balancing test. Does that sound familiar?
Well, I just joined the Office of Regulatory Staff in 2022, so I'm not familiar with what they were doing back in 2013.
Sure, and I knew you were relatively new, so I wasn't positive.
Okay.
So if you're not aware that it's changed, that's fine. And I guess likewise, you're not familiar that the Department of Consumer Affairs' role to represent the consumer interest was removed in 2004 and restored in 2018?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Walmart, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. We move to commissioner questions. Any commissioner questions? I'm sorry.
No
Say
questions.
CCL. I'm not looking at my sheet. Now, commissioner questions. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. Gordon, good to have you here today.
It's good to be here.
Have you heard the conversations about expand, modify, and the third one, amend?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about the idea of a process or a definition that allows the company some ease in making what I will just call minor changes, more streamlined?
Me personally, I love everything to be well defined and delineated. So I would leave it to the commission's discretion, but I think that good definitions are very helpful.
Well, let me go then to a broader question. What was ORS's concern with saying that authority should stay on the commission's in the commission's realm?
Our principal concern is to ensure customer protection through participation and review by interested parties and enhance transparency of the process.
Okay. Do you think that there's a way that those concerns can be managed with better definition for how the amendments, modifications, and the expansions happen?
If you don't mind, I'd like to go into a little bit of what ORS is envisioning as the process.
I would appreciate that.
So, as Witness Gravatt said, we're not picturing necessarily a full hearing for every little thing. We're anticipating a much more straightforward process where the company perhaps submits a letter to the commission ORS would have ORS and other parties, interested parties, would have a chance to review that letter, and if there are no objections, the commission could simply address it.
At a business meeting?
At a business meeting, yes. So I think that while definitions would be very helpful with, to address witness Shelton's example of the thermostats, I believe, from yesterday. While that wouldn't necessarily be considered a change, it's more of a pass-through of charges from the vendor. Something like that wouldn't necessarily need to come to the commission because it's a pass-through of charges, not necessarily a change. But with the definitions that you're suggesting, that could be clearly delineated, and that would go toward our goal of enhancing transparency.
How do we get to those definitions?
I'm afraid that would have to be answered by someone smarter than I.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Gordon.
Good morning.
Yesterday, in the questioning with Ms. Shelton, actually I'd ask her about the $216 million, if that included all the cost. And I asked her if it included the rate of return. And I think she said, no, it didn't. And I wish I would have followed up, and I didn't think about it, actually, until probably sometime last night. But do you know, would the rate of return, or should the rate of return be on all of that $216 million, or would that be just the program cost portion of that $216 million?
Just reviewing my testimony here because I believe I addressed that. Believe that carrying costs are applied to program costs. So it'd just be program costs.
Thank you. And I should have made that more clear to Ms. Shelton, and I should have asked it differently and better. I guess along the lines of what Commissioner Williams was asking you, and I think I asked Ms. Shelton the same question, what are the benefits and drawbacks of having a hearing to modify, expand, amend, or terminate these programs? Go ahead.
Well, again, we're not picturing a full hearing unless there is, there's some objection or commissioner questions or something like that. But once again, this is enhancing customer protections. It's improving transparency overall. We're ensuring that everybody who wants a chance to provide input gets a chance to provide input. Those are the big benefits from the ORS's standpoint. And what we're still picturing the company having full control of the timing of its request. So the drawback that witness Shelton mentioned about potentially delaying processes on the company's part, we don't see that as an issue because, as I said, the company would still retain full control of timing. We're not asking them to come in once a year or putting specific constraints on them. So they could still see, okay, we're approaching a limit to our program participation that we're going to want to expand. Let's go ahead and put this letter forth to the commission. And if there are no objections, that's fantastic. But if there are objections, that's something that the commission's going to want to hear about, I believe.
Well, let me ask this, thinking about questions that Attorney Hall asked you, and talking about definitions, which, if there were succinct definitions and you could put it all in a box, it would make sense. But it also seems like that would be quite a challenge to me to kind of come up with all the specifics, because there's always something you leave out. So having said all of that, from ORS's perspective, would it make sense if there was some type docket, a generic docket, that to be more defined, but considered such as this?
Yes, that would make sense to have maybe not harsh definitions, but general guidelines would certainly be helpful.
And okay, good enough. Thinking about the 5-year term, used to be a 3-year term, in ORS's opinion, what are the benefits and drawbacks of these programs running 5 years or 3 years?
Well, Witness Shelton spoke to stability. And if you have a defined 5-year term, that's, to me, is a very stable foundation to work off of. 3 years is also, it's nice and stable, but to have a 5-year term, to come in every 5 years, it gives you a chance to learn, to grow, and to really analyze these programs and how they're working.
Okay. Were you present during Attorney Hall's cross-examination of Witness Shelton yesterday?
Yes, I was.
Have you or anyone at ORS had a chance to review the calculations and summaries that Attorney Hall reviewed with Witness Shelton?
No, I haven't had a chance to review those.
I guess finally, thinking about the benefit cost test, and I've heard it discussed, but is ORS satisfied with the benefit cost tests that were previously used or being used now? Does ORS believe there should be additional tests or other analyses to be performed going forward?
I believe Witness Cutter would be best positioned to answer that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Gordon, thank you. I have
Thank
no
you.
more questions.
Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I was going to let you off the hook, Mr. Gordon, but I couldn't resist.
That's what makes it fun.
Thank you for being here today. With regard to Dominion's request to be able to modify, amend, or terminate without coming to the commission for approval, do you know what their authorization is currently?
I believe that they are currently authorized to modify. One second, I have it in my testimony.
They can modify, amend, or add any measure.
Yes.
But if they terminate, they need to come to the commission.
That's correct.
And ORS doesn't agree with that current process?
ORS has had learnings since we last came to for a DSM full review like this, and we believe that, once again, in the interests of enhancing transparency and enhanced customer protections, that it would be most preferable if the commission and the EEAG and interested parties got a chance to review these changes and actions before the company just went ahead and unilaterally decided to make them.
But in the situation that Ms. Shelton described yesterday on meeting the manufacturer's rebate or lower cost, you don't think that's a modification of the program?
No, I believe that would be just a pass-through of the costs from the vendor.
Okay. How often does the advisory group meet? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I do believe that met 5 times in this last year, 5 or 7.
Just wondering, because part of your recommendation was that that the modifications, amendments, or new programs should go through the advisory group. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm just curious about the timing.
Well, the company can, I believe they're in charge of scheduling when the Energy Efficiency Advisory Group meets. That is, I believe, at the end of the meetings, they put forth a new time, and then
So everybody can get it on their schedule?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank you.
tolerance of me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me ask more questions. Just again, thinking about amend, expand, and modify and terminate. Are you aware of what the Duke Energy companies are required to do with EEDSM?
I don't believe they have that same authorization.
Meaning they don't currently have the authorization to expand, amend, or modify.
Correct.
You think that they are?
I believe they come in and bring letters or dockets.
Thank you very much. That was it.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Any redirect?
No redirect, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Torrey. Before we get to this last witness, we're going to take a little break, and it's about 12 till. If we could come back at 11 o'clock, does that suit everyone? Okay. Oh, and I excuse the witness. I forget every time. We're in recess. Good morning again. We are back in docket number 2024-192-E. The Office of Regulatory Staff is presenting witnesses, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Torrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ORS calls Mr. Eric Cutter, and he's appearing virtually.
Mr.
Oh, there
Cutter?
we go.
Mr. Cutter,
Okay. Hello, good morning.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Would you please raise your right hand?
Oh, here we go.
You solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. You're a witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Cutter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Good. Could you please state your name for the record?
Eric Cutter.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Energy and Environmental Economics. I'm a partner there and have been there for 15 years.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared 20 pages of direct testimony pre-filed in this proceeding on September 19th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I have 2 minor corrections.
And Mr. Cutter,
Oh,
your
no, sorry,
direct
that's just a
testimony.
rebuttal.
Okay.
No, my direct testimony do not.
If I asked you the same questions this morning that were posed within the pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chair, OS would move the pre-filed direct testimony of Eric Cutter be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Eric Cutter will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Cutter, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared one exhibit marked as Exhibit EC1 that accompanied your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your exhibit?
I do not.
Mr. Chair, ORS move that Exhibit EC1 be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Mr. Eric Cutter, identified as EC-1, is marked for identification and placed in the record as exhibit number 5.
Mr. Cutter, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 10 pages of surrebuttal testimony pre-filed in this proceeding on October 21st, 2024?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
Okay, here, yes, I have 2 minor changes. On page 8, line 12, the year 2035 should be replaced with the year 2034. And on page 9, line 17, the year 2025 should be replaced with the year 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter. And Mr. Chair, those corrections have been pre-filed in the docket yesterday. Mr. Cutter, with those changes, if I asked you the same questions this morning that were posed within the pre-filed surrebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chair, OS would move the pre-filed surrebuttal testimony as corrected. Mr. Eric Cutter be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed surrebuttal testimony as corrected of Mr. Eric Cutter will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Cutter, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared one exhibit marked as surrebuttal Exhibit EAC1 that accompanied your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to that exhibit?
I do not.
And Mr. Chair, OS would move that surrebuttal Exhibit EAC1 be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed surrebuttal exhibit of witness Eric Cutter, identified as EAC1, is marked for identification, will be placed in the record as exhibit number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cutter, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please give that now?
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and Commissioners. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person to compete in the tie contest. I'm testifying on behalf of the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff, or ORS, regarding Dominion Energy South Carolina's application to continue and expand its demand-side management and energy efficiency programs. My review of the company's application focused on evaluating the cost-effectiveness of the proposed programs and assessing the accuracy of the company's benefit cost calculations. The proposed portfolio includes both existing and one new proposed DSM and EE program that represents a reasonable mix of programs. In my direct testimony, I identified specific deficiencies in the company's calculation of avoided capacity costs, which are a core component of DSM program benefits. The company's methodology initially filed with the application used a 20-year levelized avoided capacity value that overstated that value for programs with durations of less than 20 years. I further recommended the company use avoided capacity costs developed based on the most recent system plans consistent with the approved 2023 Integrated Resource Plan, which is docket 2023-9-E, and used as a basis for the company's most recent avoided costs in docket 23-15-E. In rebuttal testimony and data responses, the company provided a revised benefit cost test calculation based on the result of a difference in revenue requirement, or DRR analysis. That DRR analysis compares the revenue requirement for a base case and for a change case over 38-year period from 2023 to 2060. Relative to the base case, the change case adds 100 megawatts less of capacity in 2029 and defers procurement of that capacity by 5 years to 2034. Given these plants have a useful life of 20 years, there's a difference in revenue requirement for the company all the way out into 2053. And to accurately reflect the avoided capacity value realized by the utility and its ratepayers, it is important to include that full period of analysis. However, the company used only avoided capacity cost results directly from the avoided cost docket for the first 11 years, 2023 to 2033. The company then extrapolated avoided capacity costs for 2034 onward, which is a departure from the difference in revenue requirement method approved in the avoided cost docket. The company also included a levelized avoided transmission and distribution, or T&D cost, that was not included in the original filing. In my SIR rebuttal, I explained that the company, in using only the first 11 years of capacity value derived from the difference in revenue requirement analysis, and then extrapolating values thereafter, would overstate the capacity value for DSM programs. To provide more specificity for the company to consider, I described an approach that would more accurately apply the avoided capacity costs from the avoided cost docket to value DSM programs for cost effectiveness evaluation and reflect the value for DSM programs with different useful lives. I also reviewed the avoided T&D cost included in the benefit cost calculations and determined they are reasonable to include. However, I do recommend the company perform further analysis in the subsequent 5-year authorizations to confirm the accuracy of this assumption. In conclusion, despite the potential overvaluation of capacity value in the benefit cost analysis, the company's proposed programs appear reasonable, and I recommend they be approved. I recommend the company be required to recalculate the benefit cost test calculations with annual avoided capacity values that more accurately reflect the utility's avoided costs for the entire period of the DRR analysis, and that more accurately reflect value for DSM measures and programs with different useful lives. I further recommend that if any programs have a total resource cost test ratio of less than 1, to address any necessary improvements with the Energy Efficiency Advisory Group and propose modifications in its 2026 annual update filing. That concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter. Mr. Chair, Mr. Cutter is available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Torrey. Dominion Energy, South Carolina, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
No questions.
South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs.
No questions, thank you.
Walmart, Inc.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. Cutter, thank you for being with us and offering your expertise. I think I have one question, and I'm just trying to understand on your recommendations related to the conditions that upon which you recommend that we approve the proposed 5-year plan, are these changes to be made in the 2026 update, or are they changes that you are proposing being made now?
I'm proposing that despite the differences or inaccuracies I found in the cost benefit test, that the programs be approved now, and that going forward, the avoided cost methodology be revised and updated to more accurately reflect the avoided capacity value in the future evaluations.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. You probably just said it, but it's a lot clearer to me now. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Caston.
Morning, Mr. Cutter.
Good morning.
Mr. Gordon punted this to you, so let me ask you this. Are you satisfied with the benefit cost tests that were previously used, or do you believe other benefit cost analyses or additional benefit cost analyses should be included going forward?
Yes, I should say I didn't specifically discuss this in preparing with the ORS staff. I can say, based on my experience and expertise, that the total resource cost test and the utility cost tests that are used in the filing are commonly used around the country and frequently used as a primary cost test for evaluating energy efficiency programs. So I'm not recommending, or I don't consider it essential that those tests be changed or updated.
Thank you, sir, and no more questions.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Any further questions from commissioners? Any redirect?
No redirect, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is anything further from any party? All right. I think there's been some discussion. Proposed orders will be due November 14th. All right. Well, everyone have a nice day. We are adjourned.